Hello there and welcome to my guide for painting the Rogue Traders from Crooked Dice Miniatures. As you can see, the first thing I've done is sprayed them with some Mechanicus Standard Grey spray. I'm going to start with their trousers. For Del Boy, I'm going to paint his trousers with Macragge Blue. And for Rodney's, I'm going to use the Fang. Then I'll give both sets of trousers a wash with some Drakenhof Nightshade. Once the wash is dry, I then went ahead and relayered the Macragge Blue on Del Boy's trousers, making sure I avoided any of the recesses. I then highlighted them with a 50-50 mix of Macragge Blue and Calgar Blue. And this was followed by Calgar Blue just by itself. For Rodney, we did a 50-50 mix of the Fang and Rust Grey for the first set of highlights, followed by Rust Grey just by itself for the second. I'm then going to paint both their shirts with Corn Red, which I'll wash with some Carroburg Crimson. And while that wash dries, I'll paint Del Boy's shoes with some Abaddon Black, which I'll highlight with some Corvus Black, followed by a 50-50 mix of Corvus Black and Eshin Grey. For Rodney's shoes, I'm going to use some Rhinox Hide, followed by a 50-50 mix of Rhinox Hide and Catachan Flesh, and then a final highlight of Catachan Flesh just by itself. I'll then brighten up both their shirts with some Corn Red, avoiding the recesses, and highlight that with a 50-50 mix of Corn Red and Wazdacker Red, and then a final highlight of Wazdacker Red by itself. Rodney's got a little bit of a pattern to his shirt, so for that I'm going to use some Rakarth Flesh and very carefully put that into place. While I'm there, I'll also paint his buttons with the Rakarth Flesh too. For Del Boy's coat, I'm going to use some XV88 for the inner part. And for all that outer lining, I'm going to use some Wraithbone. Then I'll wash the entire coat with some Army Painter Soft Tone. For Rodney's coat, I'm going to use some Deathworld Forest. And for the fur on his parka, I'm going to use some Wraithbone. And then I'll wash his jacket with some Army Painter Soft Tone. Next, I'll relayer the XV88 just to brighten up the jacket a little bit. This will be followed by a highlight of a 50-50 mix of XV88 and Wraithbone. Going back to Rodney's jacket, I'm going to relayer the Deathworld Forest once again to brighten it all up. I'm also going to avoid all the recesses. This will also be followed by a 50-50 mix of Deathworld Forest and Wraithbone for the highlight. Next, I'll use Wraithbone to brighten up all the fur on both of the jackets. I'm going to sort of dab it on rather than sort of paint it completely on, because I want to keep some of that texture. The clothes mostly out of the way, I'm going to move on to the skin, and for that I'm going to use some Bugman's Glow, which I'll then wash with some Reichland Flesh Shade. And while that shade dries, I'm going to use some Retributor Armor to paint the gold necklace on Del Boy, which I'll highlight with some Auric Armor Gold. I'll then paint the eyes using some Abaddon Black for the slits, followed by Matte White, and then finally Abaddon Black again for the pupil. Now I'm going to start highlighting the skin with a 50-50 mix of Bugman's Glow and Cadian Flesh Tone. Then Cadian Flesh Tone by itself. Then a 50-50 mix of Cadian Flesh Tone and Kislev Flesh. And then finally Kislev Flesh just by itself. Then I'll paint Del Boy's hair and his cigar with some Dryad Bark, and his hat with some Steel Legion Drab. I'll then wash these areas with some Agrax Earthshade. For Rodney's hair, I'm going to use some Xandri Dust, and I'll give that a wash with some Army Painter Soft Tone. To highlight the cigar, I'm going to do a 50-50 mix of Dryad Bark and Matte White, followed by that same mix but at a 30-70 ratio and just for the tips. I'll then relayer the hat with some Steel Legion Drab, I'll then add some cross-hatching to the hat with a 50-50 mix of Zandri Dust and Wraithbone. Also been based, that's Delboy and Rodney finished. However, there's probably not many people watching this or even actually own these models or following this guide. But I had a lot of fun painting these guys. These are really nice models. Crooked Dice do absolutely fantastic work. They didn't take too long to paint either, only coming in around about 3 hours. And as I said earlier, I had such a blast painting them. Crooked Dice do loads and loads of fantastic miniatures. I'm not sponsored by them or anything either, just in case you think I am. But they do lots of great work. They're definitely well worth checking out. I highly recommend them. If you follow this guide, I really hope it helped, and thank you so much for watching. Think about giving me a subscribe, and I will see you on the next one. Goodbye for now.